Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 6th of January 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today is David Scott. Welcome to the programme. David, how are things north of the border?
Well, weather-wise, it's a little grey today. Nice sunny, cold day yesterday. And in terms of the politics of the land, as crazy as always.
Good stuff. That's what we like to hear. Well, we're going to get straight in with Brexit and the continuing saga of chaos from within the British government. Now, of course, on Wednesday, Sir Ivan Rogers resigned. He was the permanent representative to the European Union. He resigned and was replaced quite quickly with Sir Tim Barrow. And this article I've chosen the Telegraph, but actually most of the mainstream media covering this today, telling us that David Davis's office, David Davis, the minister responsible for Brexit, that somebody within his office, Ollie Robbins, who's a permanent secretary to the Department for Exiting the European Union, he was vigorously opposed to the appointment of Tim Barrow, and he tried to block it. Well, David, this is just typical of British government. They know very well that they're going to do everything that they can to delay this process as much as possible. And of course, the infighting between David Davis' department and the Foreign Office has been going on for quite some time.
Yes, and it's a very strange situation where we have a policy without a majority in the House of Commons to actually support it, with a Prime Minister that didn't support it, and a cabinet that was hugely split. And as a result, we have drift, we have confusion, and we have what it looks like backsliding.
Absolutely. Now, how's things with Nippy? Because I understand Nicola Sturgeon was suggesting that if the Brexit was a soft Brexit, that would put any suggestion of Scottish independence on the back burner for quite some time. She doesn't really know which way she's going either.
Well, confusion reigns in Scotland. We've got Nippy making up international policy and looking very amateurish as she does it. We have a suggestion that somehow this is going to trigger another independence referendum, even though there's no support for that in the country, and it would simply reopen the wounds of 2014 and further divide the nation. So there's no idea of nation building, there's no idea of nationhood or of statesmanship there. And instead, we've got some ad hoc policy making to try and present ourselves as the defender of rights without any acknowledgement of where those rights actually came from, very often not the EU at all. And in fact, one of the reasons many people voted to leave was to restore their rights. So it's a very confused picture north of the border.
Well, speaking of ad hoc policy making, let's just talk about the named person scheme, because despite the legal situation, it seems that it's being described as inaccurate advice, but it's not just Perth and Kinross Council that is giving this inaccurate advice at the moment.
No, this originally came from the Information Commissioner's Office and was published on the website of the Scottish Government after the Supreme Court ruling, which basically said the advice was illegal. This was removed from the Scottish Government's website and withdrawn by the Information Commissioner, but it's still shown on the on Perth and Kinross Council's website. It's still their official policy, and it's still being followed. And despite this having been pointed out to them, they are adamant that they are going to continue with the policy they have, ignoring the Supreme Court until someone in authority, someone important, and you'll appreciate that members of the public are not important, until someone of importance tells them otherwise. So unless they actually get instruction from the Scottish Government, they're going to carry on acting, it would appear, unlawfully and illegally. So this has been highlighted by the No to Name Person campaign, who have forwarded this document to their supporters and in the Perth and Kinross area, and asked them to contact the council and point out the fact that what they're doing, the 2013 guidance from the Information Commissioner, which said if there is any doubt about the well-being of a child and the decision to share, the Data Protection Act should not be viewed as a barrier to proportionate sharing. So basically, if you have any concerns about well-being, something that is not defined, not legally definable, so if you have any concerns about anything at all that you can imagine, you can share information. This was ruled illegal by the Supreme Court. This is still being applied by Perth and Kinross Council, irrespective of the Supreme Court ruling. And in fact, we've had one case that's come up during the last week where a headmaster said, or headmistress said to a parent, yes, all this named person stuff is all sorted. I'm your named person. And the parent said, well, but the Supreme Court said it was illegal and it's been withdrawn and the act has been pulled and not implemented and it's been rewritten. What about all of that? Oh, said the headmistress, I don't know anything about that. I'm your named person. Everything's fine. So you see on the ground the realities of the illegal situation that the Scottish Government have created are still being rolled out and still affecting many, many parents.
So we'll just put this one back up again briefly. So if anybody wants to write to Perth and Kinross and ask them what they're up to, the email address there is ecsgeneralenquiries@pkc.gov.uk. Right. Now, you wanted to highlight this situation. Fife and Glasgow are going to run a pilot scheme on basic income. And this is Basic Income Earth Network website highlighting this. And we've also got The Independent here. Scotland set to pilot universal basic income scheme in Fife and Glasgow. The SNP is in favour of the policy, which would see existing welfare benefits scrapped in favour of a non-means tested guaranteed income for all citizens. I would imagine this doesn't impress you too much.
You would be right. The common acronym for this is the Basic Income Guarantee, or BIG, which is very appropriate because that is what the bill will be. The idea here is that everybody, or every adult, it varies slightly between schemes, gets a guaranteed income given to them by the government for doing nothing. So you can sit on your backside, you get your guaranteed income. And then this is made up for by taxing every penny you make above that guaranteed income, presumably much more heavily, although that's never quite discussed or explained as these schemes are rolled out. Most of the figures I've seen, you're looking at a doubling of the budget for Social Security to actually run these schemes. But we will see, because obviously if the basic income is very low, it's not really a basic income. They're trying to get over the manifest failure of the welfare state, the crazy situations where you're asking organisations to decide whether someone's fit or unfit for work, as though there's a uniquely discernible dividing line between the two, when the human condition is that no such dividing line exists. So you get waste, you get gross unfairness in places, and you get a huge expensive bureaucratic machine to try to administer the unadministrable. So I can understand why they want the basic income, but the incentives are not to work. The incentives are to tax more heavily, so a further disincentive to work. The incentives will make the society much poorer. And it is, of course, based on theft. And as a moral position, it's indefensible as such.
Okay, well, let's look at other indefensible things. This article from Reuters here, the January effect for stock markets is fading, and this is according to Goldman Sachs. Now, when I was working in the financial industry, of course, round about Christmas, January time, was typically the time when the stock market went through the roof. And in fact, this year, of course, it has, because it's sitting at, the FTSE 100 is sitting at 7188. Now, one thing that this article doesn't mention, of course, is the fact that stock markets tend to be pumped up around this time of year because, of course, this is bonus time. And people like to be taking as much profit as they can, or at least pumping things up as much as they can to try to persuade their bosses that they've done something productive, which is unlikely in the financial markets. But Reuters here saying US and UK equity indexes holding near record highs, a brighter earnings outlook and rising forecasts for economic growth have all spurned talk of the January effect, or the notion that the first month of the year is always bullish for stocks. And then they go on to say that data is suggesting otherwise, that compared to 1999, this effect is a lot less, and so on. But the basic thing here, David, is that stocks bear no relevance to reality. It's as much sentiment as anything else, and when the sentiment is bonus time, that perhaps has something to do with it.
Sentiment and the money printing has to go somewhere. We've generated vast amounts of extra cash. Central banks have. This is floating around the system. It's created a huge bubble in government bonds, which is now peaked. The money has to go somewhere, so it goes into, a wee while ago, it was speculation on food, and that caused huge problems all around the world, particularly in Arabia, because of food price increases. It might be speculation on other resources, or it might be speculation on the stock market, but it's not based on anything real. We also have the plunge protection scheme in full operation, run by the Federal Reserve, who now seem to view their role as making sure the stock market stays up and prices never go down.
Indeed. But it's not all good news for them, is it? Because they don't seem to be able to agree on capital rules for banks. And this is the new Basel IV deal, which was supposed to be signed off on the 8th of January. It's been indefinitely postponed. They are saying that they can't agree on what they're calling internal methods of risk weighing, which, well, you can decide what that means for yourself. The Basel IV saying that the banks must have capital reserves increased by 16%. And they can't agree on this at all, so they are pushing it back as far as they can. Basically, at the bottom line here is, David, they can't possibly meet these targets of a rise of capital reserves by 16%. So they've got no choice. They're bankrupt, morally and literally.
Morally and literally. Well, they've always been literally bankrupt because the nature of fractional reserve banking, printing money out of nothing and lending it out, is that the assets of the bank are in terms of loans and the liabilities are in terms of immediate calls for from depositors. So the time horizon for those two are out of sync, and that means that every bank is inherently bankrupt because they could have all of the deposits called tomorrow, and that's called a bank run. The reason we have central banks and guarantees from governments and things is to stop that happening. And perhaps if it happened more often, we would have a better idea of what a bank actually is.
Yes, indeed. Well, here is one, Barclays Bank. And it seems that the LIBOR scandal continues to rumble on. Now, if we remember, that was the rigging of interbank lending rates. Well, so far, nobody particularly senior seems to have gone to prison for it. There have been a couple of minor traders have gone to prison. But it seems that the Serious Fraud Office is continuing to investigate. Whether it's going to lead to anything, we will see. The biggest scalp, or the biggest person on the list so far, is the Barclays Securities Japan manager, Mark Dearlove, and also the group balance sheet head, Miles Story. That must have been an interesting job to manage the group's balance sheet. He's now working for Clydesdale Bank. He's also under investigation. The Serious Fraud Office and Barclays have declined to comment on this, according to the Financial Times. But these things just don't seem to want to go away for them, and it is a problem, isn't it?
It is, and I see that Barclays have rejected the kind offer of the American government to agree to pay them, I think it was about $2 billion. This was part of the sort of same deal that Deutsche Bank eventually settled for. I think it was $7 billion, having been threatened with 14 at one point. Barclays are convinced that they are not liable to anything like this degree. This is concerning the securitization of mortgages and the collapse around 2007-8. So they are wanting to have their time in court in America and not to reach agreement with the Federal Reserve and take their chances in open court. So they're in for a fairly exciting time there, I would have thought.
Yes. Okay, well, let's change the subject then. A bit of defense news here. This is MBDA Missile Systems. and they have been awarded a contract, £30 million contract, to produce laser direct energy weapon capability demonstrator. And this is to the UK Dragonfire Consortium. Very nice names. It's going to, the project is going to assess laser direct energy weapon technologies and approaches. And they're going to have a demonstration of the system by 2019. Who's involved in this? Well, let's see what Harriet Baldwin had to say from the Ministry of Defence. The UK has long enjoyed a reputation as a world leader in innovation, and it is truly groundbreaking projects like the laser directed energy weapon which will keep this country ahead of the curve. That makes me feel good to be ahead of the curve in this sort of thing. She said the Defence Innovation Initiative aims to encourage imagination, ingenuity, and entrepreneurship in pursuit of maintaining a military advantage in the future. With a rising defence budget and £178 billion equipment plan, our commitment to innovation will deliver a safer and more prosperous Britain. That must make you feel very safe and prosperous, David.
It makes me feel doubtful. The record of government procurement on innovation is not stellar. And this goes back all the way to the Second World War. If you follow the example of the Lee Light, which is an extremely effective weapon that someone basically did in his spare time in a tucked away hangar on a military base, having been turned down by the MOD or its predecessor many times for the idea. And it wasn't until the government development program hit the buffers and failed that they came back and found that he had a working prototype. I'm all for innovation. I'm all for entrepreneurship. I'm not entirely convinced that Her Majesty's government and central control and central planning can actually generate these particularly well.
Well, just to let everybody know who is involved in the UK Dragonfire Consortium, it's partners from the UK and international partners. MDBA is one of them, Kinetic, GKN, ARCA, BAE Systems, Marshall, ADG, these types of companies. So that's all good stuff.
One further thing on that, we took a decision for single point procurement back in, was it not the 60s? And the whole idea of entrepreneurship and innovation depends on competition. So if we've only got one provider of anything, there is no competition. And I would have thought that was a bit of a fundamental problem.
Indeed. Okay, just before we move on to some other things, I just wanted to remind everybody, of course, that there is an anti-fracking protest going on at Kirkby Misperton in North Yorkshire at the moment. Ian Crane is there, and because he's there, he is not going to be producing live fracking nightmares for the next couple of weeks. But on Sunday, he is inviting everybody that would like to go to the Kirkby Misperton Protection Camp. The postcode is YO176UE if you want to get there. 3 p.m. He will be pre-recording, or he'll be doing it live at the camp, and then we'll be playing it out on Monday evening as usual. But if you'd like to go and take part in that, head over to Kirkby Misperton. He says basically if you follow the map to Kirkby Misperton, follow the road to Kirkby Misperton, you can't miss it. It's on the A1, or just off the A169, and he hopes to see as many people as possible there. So do get along. Now, Philip Hammond, then, our illustrious Chancellor of the Exchequer, is wooing people in the Gulf. Now, this follows trips by both Boris Johnson and Theresa May in recent weeks and months. So he's been in the Gulf. He's there to strengthen economic relations with Gulf allies. And this is part of his New Year tour. It's like he's some kind of pop group or something, I'm not sure. And he's met with senior leaders in Kuwait, UAE, and Qatar, strengthening relations, trade links, economic ties. And he's due to meet with more political leaders, including the acting Prime Minister, Finance Minister, Central Bank Governor, as well as the Kuwait Investment Authority, to discuss strengthening ties. What are we doing there, David?
It sounds like we're selling weapons. I think, what else do we sell to them? Rolls Royces, whiskey, not officially, and Guns, I would have thought would be the big ticket export items. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's other things we're selling to the Middle East, but I can't quite imagine what they would be right now.
No, well, it's good because Philip Hammond said, as we leave the EU, Britain's future prosperity requires us to maintain the strongest possible economic links with our European neighbours while enhancing our existing partnerships with the wider world. There is huge potential to expand our economic and investment relationships with our Gulf allies in the future. And in the last few weeks, we've seen a number of significant investments into the UK, which are a real vote of confidence that together we can seize the opportunities that lie ahead. So that's feeling almost as good there as I was about the directed energy weapons. But there you go.
Well, just briefly. I mean, if we're going to make friends all around the world, right, we have to decide on what basis we're making those friends. If we're making it on, we're not going to interfere with your internal affairs. We might not like certain things that you do, but we will trade freely with you, and we will compete in the international marketplace. End of. And there's really nothing else to it. Then fair enough if that's the policy. But we are saying to, for example, Russia, that you're beyond the pale and we're going to we're going to impose sanctions on you because of your terrible behaviour, while simultaneously saying to Saudi, everything's fine here, there's nothing to worry about, that you are our ally. Now that doesn't make any sense if you have a moral standpoint. If you have a standpoint that we're going to be independent and trade with everybody, then okay, that's defensible, that we're not responsible for what these people do. But you can't have the hostility towards Russia under those circumstances. You have to have some sort of level playing field. So it's the hypocrisy of it all that just doesn't sit well.
Okay, well, let's talk Israel and Palestine then. And you wanted to highlight the situation with John Kerry.
John Kerry, during the holiday period, there was a vote in the UN, excuse me, which went against the settlement building program in the West Bank, and which wasn't vetoed by the United States. It was supported by Britain, and it transpired, arranged, the wording was negotiated with Britain and the United States, fully involved in deciding what the wording was going to be. This created a bit of a backlash and expressions of outrage from the Israeli political elite.
Well, look, but just before, David, just before we go on to that, let's just mention Matthew Rycroft and his comments at that adoption of that resolution. So that was Resolution 2334 in the United Nations. And he said, this is the first Security Council resolution on the Israel-Palestine issue in over 7 years. He said the adoption of the resolution is first and foremost a clear reinforcement of the international community's conviction that a two-state solution remains the only viable route to sustained Arab-Israeli peace. And then he went on to suggest that terrorists are treated as martyrs. Peace, at least so long as that goes on, peace is going to be distant. He was very critical of anybody that criticized Israel in any way. He said the UK is a clear and close friend of the State of Israel. We reject all efforts to delegitimize or undermine Israel. The movement for boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, rooted as it is in culture of prejudice and hostility to Israel, is a barrier to peace. And my government will never support any resolution that advances the cause of boycotts or delegitimization in any way. He said that the resolution also takes important and balanced steps to support peace through calling for immediate steps to prevent incitement of acts of violence against civilians. We might be talking about that in a second. And it calls upon both parties to act on the basis of international law. And it calls upon all parties to exert collective efforts to launch credible negotiations and so on. It was all, well, I don't even know how to say it. He didn't really say very much at all.
It was a lot of words signifying not very little. It was just basically saying no change, and everything he said ignored half of the truth of the situation. So it was all a huge simplification. Okay, it's a short speech, and it's pretty much got to be, but it's not just the Palestinian Arabs, for example, that create heroes out of terrorists, or indeed political leaders out of terrorists. That applies to both sides of the equation. And the nature of the legitimacy of a state. Well, I don't know about you. I would like to wake up one morning and find that the people of this country no longer viewed their government as legitimate, because I think that would be the first starting point to having something, not a revolution, something better in place, where people say, no, you're bound by the rule of law, and if you're breaking the rule of law, we're not going to do what you say. And that sort of challenge to authority, I would want to see here, Israel, and everywhere else, because the authorities are taking people down the route of conflict, of division, and of the suffering that comes from it.
Okay, so what was Israel's reaction to Kerry's speech?
Well, Israel's reaction to the vote was initially shock and horror, and we've been stabbed in the back, and this is dreadful. So it was extremely hostile to start with. Kerry then made a speech. Kerry's speech was about half an hour long, and it was streamed live. And I would actually encourage people to go and try and find it. It's easy to find on YouTube and elsewhere, and have a listen to it, because it was really quite surprising, because it was actually quite thoughtful, and it clearly showed that they understood the nature of the problem. And the reaction, there was like 4 reactions in the main paper, the Haaretz, the main paper in Israel, within 3 or 4 days, saying 4 completely different things. But eventually they got it right when they said that what Kerry said is tell Israel they're committing suicide, because you have a situation where the idea behind the state of Israel is it's Jewish and democratic, right? It is both of these things. Now that can only be the case with a demographic majority of Jews that is completely in the predominance. You have between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean roughly equal numbers of non-Jewish Arabs and Jews. So if you put those into one state, you no longer can have a state that is both democratic and Jewish. And he made this point explicitly. You have to pick one or the other. It has to be a Jewish state based on some form of tyranny or oppression, or it has to be a democratic state that will no longer be Jewish. So if you have one state, you do not have Israel. If you have 2 states, you can have Israel. That was his point. Now, his point was then that the settlement processes, the settlement progress has been such that the idea of having a second state, a Palestinian state, is no longer viable because of the settlements. Or his view was it was close to being that. I actually think that point has long since been passed. And if it's no longer viable and you have a one-state solution, you've essentially signed the death warrant for the state of Israel. And his point is it's the Israeli government that is signing that death warrant, hence it's suicide. So that was eventually what came out of the analysis on Haaretz. I thought that was spot on, and I thought I've never been a fan of Kerry at all, but I actually thought his speech was thoughtful, intelligent, well balanced, and actually quite it showed a quite impressive grasp of the realities. I was surprised at how good it was.
Okay, well, the other thing that happened in Israel just after the break was the fact that this Israeli soldier was convicted of manslaughter for shooting the wounded Palestinian lying on the ground. And again, huge comment on this in Haaretz. So we've got an opinion piece here, 2 irreconcilable Israel's clash over Elor Azaria, defender of Jewish history versus convicted killer. We've got the trial, the People's Army versus the People's Politicians, and they're asked an opinion piece here entitled "If Elor Azaria Was Ashkenazi." He isn't everyone's child. He's the child of the new Israeli right, and he comes from a good Ashkenazi family. And had he come from a good Ashkenazi family, the national debate would have been about the futile occupation and how it criminalized one of our finest. So this has clearly divided the country, and the question is that division genuine, or is it being pumped up?
Well, it's certainly been pumped up with the politicians, but I think the division is genuine enough. Just to quote from the article here, the People's Army versus the People's Politicians. So it's seen Wednesday outside the military courtroom at IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv, where the ruling in the trial of Sergeant Elor Azadi was read out was unprecedented. An inflamed mob, only a stone's throw from the General Staff's building, called for the murder of the Chief of Staff, Gadi Eisenkot, and threatened to make sure his fate was the same as the former Prime Minister and Chief of Staff, Yitzhak Rabin. So that shows you the depth of anger in some places in Israel over this, and the degree of division that they're seeing in the society between the IDF leadership, who maybe somewhat bizarrely, are the defenders of the rule of law, and the mob, who want killing of Palestinians in cold blood to be essentially legalized.
Okay, well, sticking with Israel for a second then, Benjamin Netanyahu not having the best time, subject of criminal investigation, and in fact, I believe it's 2 investigations now.
He has been interviewed twice within a week. One of the police interviews lasted for 5 hours, yes, on 2 different cases. And it's all to do with graft and bribery and people giving him cigars and funding his lavish lifestyle by providing the liqueurs and expensive cigars, etc., that he apparently needs. The comparison here I draw is between Israel and Britain, and we don't come out well. There's 2 things that are happening here. One, you have got an energetic police investigation of the highest political office in the land. I cannot imagine that happening in Britain. If you look at the cover-up of the child sexual abuse scandal, which went on for years, and the police knew there was people at the most senior levels in the political elite in this country who were abusing children on a regular basis, and they hid it. They covered it up. And here we're seeing, with a much lesser allegation, we're seeing a concentrated police investigation of the Prime Minister. So that's encouraging, that you have still the independence of thought in Israel to actually do that. And the press are reporting it. It's not hidden. It's not covered up. I had a discussion regarding the situation in Britain regarding the child sexual abuse with some of my friends in Israel. And I was describing the degree of press collusion in hiding the truth. And they were astounded by this. They said, well, in Israel, that would never happen. The press would report it. And if anybody went after the press as a whole would round on whatever politician or official and basically take them down. So you have a much more lively, independent-minded press in Israel than you do in Britain. And you can see that in the commentary on the Middle East crisis you get from Haaretz is far more insightful and far more hard-hitting than anything you'll get from The Guardian or anything in Britain. But you also see it in the way they're approaching the politicians. And remember that a former president of Israel has only recently been released from prison, where he was placed based on sexual assault conviction. So there is more rule of law there, despite everything, than there is in Britain, where the courts, the Fourth Estate, and the politicians seem to be in some form of alliance against the people.
Well, that's absolutely right. And of course, Britain the first to criticise anybody else if they behave in any way similar to our own government. Okay, a bit of Syrian news now. Russia starting to pull out of Syria, they say. Now, we've heard this before, but we'll see what degree they decide to move out. This is TASS, the Russian news agency, reporting this. It's beginning with the Admiral Kuznetsov aircraft carrier, so undoubtedly that has to come back out of the Mediterranean again, has to sail past Britain again, and without question, Britain will be on high alert for that, and the entire British Navy, I'm sure, will be sailing alongside it as it moves up the channel or whichever way it decides to go. So the defense ministry said that in accordance with the decision by Vladimir Putin, Russia's defense ministry is starting to downsize the grouping of the armed forces in Syria. And they said that they would like to thank the staff of the aircraft carrier group for the success in implementing its tasks, and that they're ordering the senior officer of the mission to begin relocating the group today and move the main fleet away from Syria as per the plan approved earlier. So that is moving ahead. In the meantime, Turkey, noticing some foreign intervention in some of the recent so-called terrorist attacks, ISIS attacks in Istanbul. This is the Deputy Turkish Prime Minister suggesting that foreign intelligence services could be behind the New Year's attack in Istanbul, and he's basing that on how professional the attack was carried out. He said, "I'm of the opinion it is not possible for the perpetrator to have carried out such an attack without any support. It seems like a Secret Service thing. All these things are being assessed." Well, it's interesting that assessment from Turkey comes out at the same time that Salon is pushing out this article from the TomDispatch.com website, headlined "Year of the Commando. U.S. Special Ops Forces deployed to 138 nations." So what are they doing? Now, obviously, which nations are they talking about? Let me see. Sorry. Yemen, of course, Libya, Arab Emirates, Syria, a whole bunch of different countries, including Turkey. And so it's hardly surprising that this type of thing, David, is going on, that Turkey would come to this conclusion under these sort of circumstances.
Well, yes, and this is obviously reminiscent of Gladio and the strategy of tension and the way that NATO have been involved for many years in manipulating political views via violence and via terrorism and via false flag attacks. We've got 193 nations in the world, and you said that the special forces were in, what, 138?
138 nations is what that article is reporting.
Out of 193, so that's quite a number. That's quite astounding.
Absolutely. So, well, look, one of the things that sorry, I'll just put that article back up again for a second, because one of the things that it said was that for America, 2016 may have been the year of the commando in one conflict zone after another. Across the northern tier of Africa and the greater Middle East, U.S. Special Operations Forces waged their particular brand of low-profile warfare. And they were asking the question, would Donald Trump continue this into his presidency? So I thought it was quite amusing, and I say that with a little bit of sarcasm, that the Wall Street Journal would publish this article, a Lincoln lesson for Donald Trump is the headline, a Lincoln lesson for Donald Trump. It seemed like a bit of a threat to me. And as I read down the text, I wasn't getting any better feeling. So it started off by saying, after his surprise win in the presidential election of 1860, Abraham Lincoln gathered a coterie of reporters and enthused, "Well, boys, your troubles are now over. Mine have only just begun." Lincoln didn't realize how prescient he was, or the challenges that he would face. In response to assuming office, most of the South seceded from the Union. Then the crisis at Fort Sumter escalated, and so it goes on. And they say, here in history lies a warning for Donald Trump. The president-elect, who has no formal political experience, will soon be buffeted by the hard truths that each of our presidents, including hallowed ones like Lincoln, invariably discover the hard way. That's spectacular language, David.
It is astounding language. The idea that Lincoln's hallowed is quite interesting. It seems that the list of great American presidents aligns with the list of body counts and numbers of dead Americans. So bizarrely, the way to become a great American president is to end up standing in a pile of corpses of your own countrymen. Lincoln was the instigator in many ways of a war that took 800,000 lives and was completely unnecessary. and it was about tax. Never let it be said it was about slavery. If you look at what he said early on and before the secession, he was quite clear that he would protect slavery completely, providing the tax money from the South kept rolling into the coffers of the central government. It was not about freedom, and Lincoln himself was really quite racist in his views towards what was then termed the Negro population in America. And he was anything but honest, and he was not at all the sort of man that he's built up to be in the realm of myth. But the one thing he was shot, and it's very strange that the Wall Street Journal should use such language concerning Trump, particularly given the number of death threats that have actually been made against him by upset snowflake millennial liberals on Twitter and YouTube.
But this is perhaps another demonstration of the sort of insanity of the mainstream media at the moment, perhaps.
Insanity and increasing irrelevancy. It's one of the things that we've seen in 2016. I think is going to continue. One of the trends that are going to continue is the mainstream media are losing not only the control over the discourse and over public thought. They're losing any legitimacy in the eyes of the public, who are simply not buying lies anymore. You know, they've come up with the fake news meme, and that's not run very well because people are pointing at what's coming out of things like the Washington Post and the New York Times, and saying, "There's your fake news," and we've had enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, look, we'll leave it there for today. Thanks for joining me, David. Thanks for everybody watching today. We'll be back at 1 o'clock as usual on Monday, and hopefully Brian will be back by then. So have a good weekend, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.